Hi everyone, it's Darlene. Welcome back for another card video. In today's card, I'm creating a foreground and background scene using vellum. I'm using the trees from the Foxy Friend set, which is not a Christmas set, but these trees look Christmassy, and the Softly Falling embossing folder by Stampin' Up. I've discovered that using the foam pad from my Misty as a stamping platform gives me really good results with solid stamps. So I'm going to put that under a piece of Neenah Solar White cardstock. I'm going to start with my larger tree and I'm going to do the light ink in the background. So this is Distress Oxide in Cracked Pistachio. And the nice thing about this ink is you can look at the stamp and see if you've got good coverage. So I'm going to stamp this kind of off to the side here, and I'm going to stamp these trees at different heights. So it looks like it's a forest. So I've got two of these that I'm stamping in the Cracked Pistachio, the large ones. And then I'm going to take my smaller tree and use Lucky Clover. And I'm going to stamp right on top of that Cracked Pistachio. And the great thing about these oxide inks is that you can stamp on top without any problem. It won't blend with what's behind. It just stamps on top of it. Now I messed up my pad a little bit, you can see, with some ink, but no problem. I just take my absorber and it comes right up. And this works with the oxide inks as well as dye inks. I'm going to stamp another large tree in Lucky Clover for my foreground. Now all of these trees have obviously the green trunk, so I'm going to take a colored pencil. This is dark brown Prismacolor, and I'm just going to color over all of the trunks. You could use a marker for this as well. Next I'm going to work on my vellum. I've cut a sheet that's 4 1/4 wide and pretty long. Just make sure it's at least 6.5 inches long. So I'm going to put it at the bottom of my embossing folder. And you can see that it's 6 inches high, and what I'm going to do is put it into my scoreboard, and right at 6 is where it's going to end, where that snow ends. So I'm going to go ahead and score it right there on that 6-inch mark, and then I'm going to fold it and crease it with my bone folder. And I'm going to go ahead and cut off the excess. I really don't need that much extra, so it's going to be about 1/2 inch that I'll cut off. And this will help me wrap it around my cardstock later. So here's my 1/2 inch. Now when I put it back in, remember it's 6 inches and my card is going to be 5.5. So I'm going to mark it here at 5.5. Sorry, it's a little off camera, but I'm scoring it at 5.5. And I make sure I really press down. This is Basil 40-pound vellum. It's a really strong, thick vellum. So I'm going to crease that, and now I'm ready to wrap this around my card. You can see I've got my 1/2 inch flaps that'll go around to keep it in place. Now this isn't an exact science, so what I'm going to do is put my panel inside the vellum and see how it fits. Now it is too small, so I mean the cardstock is too big, you can see, for this vellum to wrap around. So what I need to do is just trim off, and I'm trimming off the top, not the bottom. So I'm going to trim off just a little bit. I think I trimmed off maybe a little bit less than 1/8, maybe 1/16 of an inch. And still it's a little bit too large, so I'm going to go back to the trimmer, just cut off a little sliver, and then try to put it back in here, and now it seems to work. Now you may cut it a little bit too small, no big deal. Your excess will be at the top and it'll be hardly noticeable. I want to decorate my tree, so I'm going to use this stamp here in the set that looks kind of like garland. But first I need to test to make sure that my oxide ink is dry. So I'm just using some clear embossing powder to make sure nothing sticks, and it doesn't. So I have this embossing powder. It's Red Tinsel by Ranger, and it's this glittery red powder. It's really, really pretty for Christmas time. And what I'm doing is stamping my garland. It really doesn't matter what part of the stamp you use, but I'm just sort of making it kind of curve around the 3 different levels of this tree. And then I'm going to sprinkle it with the powder, and then I can just take my brush if I accidentally overlapped part of it. I'm going to be cutting this tree out, which is why I'm not too worried about it hanging off the side here. So I'm just going to wipe it off on all the areas that my stamp had covered that didn't need to. And then I always use paper. I just fold a piece of paper and then I tap it back into my container, and then I kind of hold my paper over the garbage and just sort of shake it out, and it seems to work for me. So I'm going to heat that to set it, and then I'll cut it out with a pair of scissors. I also want a star for my tree, so I'm going to take this Holiday Shapes and this American Crafts glitter paper. I love this little die here. I use it all the time for the stars and the hearts. I'm going to use the 2nd largest star. And then I have this Merry and Bright set of sentiments by Ellen Hudson. And it's got Celebrate in it also, as well as Happy, I think, and Wishes. Anyway, so I cut that out of black cardstock. And now I'm going to put some Tombow Mono Multi-Glue on the back of my tree, and I'm going to place it kind of off-center to the right so it looks like it's kind of in front of all these other trees. I'm just going to be careful so that I don't spread my glue out so that it seeps out from underneath that tree. And then I put a block in place for maybe a minute just to make sure that it was dry. So for my star, I'm going to take a glue dot. This is 1/8 of an inch, and I just kind of roll it around between my fingers to make it small and put it right there in the center of my star, and then I'll just use my tweezers to place it right on top. Now I'm putting all my elements on the vellum first before I add it to my cardstock. So next are my sentiment pieces, and I'm just going to put some 2A glue on the back of all 3 of these. I like how there's an "and" in this set. It's just kind of a cool ampersand sign. For the eyes, I always just use a marker because those little pieces are just too hard to work with. Now that my elements are on the vellum, I'm going to add some adhesive to the back. So I'm going to use tape runner on the flap. So I'm going to use my ATG here. And then I'm going to take some Tombow Mono Multi-Glue and add a bunch of glue behind the tree and also behind the sentiment in little tiny dots. Now you can see why I put my elements on the vellum first, so that I would be able to hide my glue behind all of these elements. All right, so once I get my adhesive on there, I'm going to take the bottom part and press it against that crease. So it's definitely at the bottom of my vellum. Fold my flap over. So now I've secured the bottom. Now I'm going to flip this over and carefully just sort of work my way from the bottom to the top to make sure all of the glue is set on that piece of cardstock. And then once I get to the top, then I can fold my flap. I'm still working on this here. And then I can fold my flap over, and the ATG tape runner will hold the back. So I was really happy with the way this turned out. Look at how it's just stuck on there in just the perfect amount. And then I can add some ATG tape runner to the back of this whole panel and adhere it to a card base, just 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch Neenah Solar White. So again, this is not a perfect science, and so this was a little small, the vellum panel. So what I'm going to take is a scissor, and I'll just trim off the bottom, being careful not to trim the vellum at all. And that is the card for today. So pretty easy way to have a background and a foreground by just inserting some vellum in the middle. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed that, and I will see you next time. Thanks for watching.